Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today we're going to be doing a how-to. We're going to be doing a how-to on how to debunk junk internet health claims. And this is a follow-up of the episode I had last week with Dr. Keith Ayoob, in which we discussed a recent medical research report about the effects of processing on flavanol levels and whether or not the flavanol levels from the processing had an impact on health outcomes. Now, because these are medical research reports, they require very, very specific expertise in terms of understanding what is being said and understanding whether the methodology or the study design. And so that's why I invited Dr. Ayoob to join. He's a pediatric nutritionist. He's a professor emeritus at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And most importantly, he was able to get his hands on the research report. I was only able to get my hands on a summary of it. And so we had that discussion. But at the end of that discussion, he mentioned that there was a group that had published a sort of 10 red flags of junk science. And that's what inspired this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. We're going to be taking a look at 10 red flags or 10 signs that an internet health claim may be junk science and or a scam, and what you can do to determine whether or not what you're looking at is reliable on its face, or how you should go and maybe do a little extra research to find out what it is that whether or not you should take the claims at face value, and whether or not you should spend money. Now, in addition to that, we're going to be taking a look at a very, very specific individual, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Stephen Gundry. We're also going to go take a look at the Maya ceremonial cacao claim because recently I've been getting a lot of comments on the post on Facebook and here on YouTube that say that, they're being scammed by credit card charges that they never authorized. So we're going to take a look at that. And we're also going to be going and doing a quick jaunt back to my episodes on Dr. Lane Kilpatrick to see how he fits the pattern that is associated with how do you trust health claims that are made on the internet. Right before we do, I'd like to point out that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go click on the green button at the top. I'm logged in this browser, but you can click on it. It will say join. If you are not a member, there are always been a free membership tier since the Chocolate Life was founded in 2008. But if you do have the financial resources to support the work that we're doing here, there are premium memberships that start at $5 a month or $42 a year for Douglas Adams fans, of which I am a huge one. I also want to remind, before we begin, that for every episode of Pod Save, no, that's not what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say was you can go into the comments, whether it's the live chat on YouTube or the comments on LinkedIn and Facebook. And if you have a question or a comment about anything that I'm saying here today, you can go put it there. I will get that up on screen, and I will do my best to answer it over the course. And I may not get to the comment right away, depending on, this is a stream of conscious kind of thing that I'm doing here. So let's go. And the next point which is for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I put together a post. And this is the post for today's episode. Now, you may remember this gentleman. I'm sorry. This is the same doctor that I used for the Dr. Lane Kilpatrick episodes. But I wanted to just provide some continuity. Whenever I have going to use a medical doctor in anything, I think I'm going to default to this doctor here. But with that out of the way, so this is the link to the episode with Dr. Keith Ayoob. This is the one on processing cacao. Maybe less isn't always more, in which we discuss this. And in that episode, Keith pointed me to this list of 10 red flags of junk science. This version of it is published by the International Food Information Council. And I originally wanted to call this episode 10 Red Flags of Junk Science, but I wasn't using this list specifically. And so I renamed it because I developed my own list of 10, 10 points, which is specifically around not just junk science, but internet scams and how to detect them, how to detect them. So the 10 red flags of junk science are recommendations that promise a quick fix, dire warnings of danger from a single product or regimen, claims that sound too big to be true, simplistic conclusions drawn from a complex study, recommendations based on a single study, dramatic statements that are refuted by reputable scientific organizations, lots of good and bad foods, recommendations made to help sell a product, recommendations based on studies published without peer review, and recommendations from studies that ignore differences among individuals or groups. Now, so if you want to, this is an image which is embedded in the page. If you're just listening to this, you can go to this post on the Chocolate Life, but you can go take a look at these and you can use them as an additional guide to what's going on, right? I also created links to previous episodes, so the Tulane Kilpatrick episodes and the Maya ceremonial cacao episode, right? So, and then there are some links specifically around who Dr. Gundry is. And with that, let me get to a presentation for today. Let me get myself out of the way a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to get myself out of the way. Let's see, let me hide this, give ourselves some more room. All right, so this is a presentation that I created on using Claude Design. I'm actually presenting live from Claude Design here right now. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to embed this PDF on the page for today's episode if you want to download the PDF and take a look at it. I've also developed a version of this, which is an ebook, and I'm going to, it's a 20-page ebook. It goes into detail, and I'm going to put this as a PDF, create a PDF from it, and then I'm also going to embed it onto the page for today's episode, so you can download it and you have these resources at hand, right? But that's what it is: debunking junk internet health claims, right? So let's go and main point. Number one point is real science is boring and transparent. Scams are exciting and mysterious. And if you go and take just that one bit of advice, right? If they're making an extravagant claim, they're saying there's a conspiracy behind it to keep you from knowing the truth, that's the exciting and mysterious part. And real science is usually not exciting and mysterious. It is boring and transparent. Now, right, again, generalization, but that's one thing that you can use right away to figure out whether or not you should pay attention or whether or not you should dive deeper into the claims being made, because that's really what it is that I want to do here. I want to discuss when you should pay attention or pay closer attention. What are some signs? What are some red flags that you should pay closer attention and that you need to do some more due diligence rather than doing your own research? You need to do due diligence. So having said that, who is Dr. Stephen Gundry? So let me also hide this so we can see the entire thing. Who is Dr. Stephen Gundry? So the answer is Dr. Stephen Gundry is a real surgeon. He's a doctor of cardiothoracic surgery, right? But right now he is focused on giving nutrition advice, right? So the degree in cardiothoracic surgery, the experience as a cardiothoracic surgeon is real. He has a published history in peer-reviewed surgical journals. However, cardiac surgery is not training in diet, digestion, or epidemiology. He has a thesis based around lectins, which are proteins in beans and grains and vegetables. His theory, the lectin theory of disease, is that most disease and especially inflammatory diseases, are because of consuming lectins, right? However, the science and the doctors And nutritionists have said this is pseudoscience, it's not real, by the medical and nutritional communities. And the MD travels with him. Let me get myself out of the way here. The MD travels with him as a shield for claims that contradict established nutritional science. Why am I going and talking about Dr. Gundry? The answer is he shows up a lot in my social media feeds. Now, I don't get a lot of recommendations for his YouTube videos, right? But I get a lot of ads on other things that I'm watching. And the challenge with an ad is there's no easy way to get a transcript of the text of the ad, and it goes by relatively quickly. And that's part of why people pay attention to them. There's a sort of urgency associated with them. There's a spectacular claim associated with them. And I wanted to use Dr. Gundry as an example precisely because he seems to be almost omnipresent. If you've been on the internet, you spend some time at Facebook, you spend some time on TikTok, you spend some time on Instagram, chances are you spend some time on YouTube, chances are you've run into one of his videos or one of his ads or both. I thought it was very interesting. I was getting set up for today and I saw an ad for one of his products run over one of his videos. So he's getting paid, right, for his own videos from the ad revenue for them, which I thought, hey, this is pretty smart thing to do when you think about it, right? But that's why I'm using Dr. Stephen Gundry, because he is everywhere. He is not the only person, but who fits into this category. But if I can give you the contours of this, you'll be able to recognize, oh, this is the issues that I'm going to have here. Now, there are, in fact, 10 things that I want to talk about. Here are the 10 signs. And again, let me get myself out of this. 10 signs, right? And I have one slide in this presentation for each of these 10 signs. So I'm not going to read this, but this is a sort of table. This is not sort of, it is a table of contents of what it is that we're going to be discussing. So, excuse me. All right. The number one sign that you need to look for, right, when you start thinking about, when you start thinking about whether or not you should accept what it is that is being claimed to you, one sign is the fact that there is no peer review, right? So this is important. So what happens? It shows up. There's only a blog post, a video, a product page, an advertisement. That's the only source for what it is that goes on. Maybe they're referring to a conference poster. What is a conference poster? Well, at a major conference where you might have doctors presenting papers, there will be a room which is filled with literally posters, right? And the posters talk about research that is being done. But going to a conference and presenting a poster is not the same thing as presenting the paper at the conference. And it's not the same as having the content the content of the research being peer reviewed by other doctors, right? There's no journal name, there's no volume, and most importantly, there's nothing called a DOI. And a DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier. And a digital object identifier is a link to a canonical URL, is a link to say this is where the primary source lives, right? So if you're looking at research or a report about research, and there is no link to a DOI, there's no link to this canonical source, you probably should say, oh, I need to go and take a look and see what is the primary source for what it is that goes on, right? And so here's where the no peer review, here's how it shows up in your social media feed. Here's how it shows up, right, on Facebook and on YouTube and places like this. But where does Dr. Gundry fit in, right? His number one headline, peer-reviewed medical publication, is an abstract in a journal supplement for a poster presentation, right? Which says, okay, there's no peer-reviewed research behind this. There is a nutritionist, a researcher by the name of T. Colin Campbell, who notes there's no published detail of the methods, the subjects, the results, right? And calls the glowing description of the conference poster, which is in a journal supplement, and it's an abstract in a journal supplement talking about the research, right? So there's no peer review, right? And what Dr. Gundry appears to be doing is he talks about his work being featured in a peer-reviewed medical publication. That may be true. The work is in the peer-reviewed medical publication, but the specific citation that he's making is actually not for something that has been peer-reviewed. It is, you need to be careful, right, about the way the claim is being presented. So just that point. So peer review is number one place where you need to look. And so let's go and take a quick look at what that might mean. So what you can do, and I've got a link to this in today's post. Excuse me, let's go here. Right, there's a link to, I use DuckDuckGo. So you can open up DuckDuckGo, right? And you can do this Dr. Stephen Gundry in whatever search engine you look at. And so what you can do is you can go and look, and you can say, okay, here's Dr. Stephen Gundry. I'm looking at, here's, right, here is just the straight search result, right? We can see, we have an ad, and then we've got a link to a Wikipedia page. I've linked to the Wikipedia page on the post for today's episode. But let's go take a look at the images that are associated with this. This is something that you can do. I'll talk about it later, but I'm jumping into it now because I'm talking about him. But you got drgundry.com. That makes a whole bunch of sense. Something called EmpoCorp, Dr. Gundry. None of the sources for these images is in fact a legitimate medical outlet. These are blogs. I mean, EmpoCorp, if you go take a look at EmpoCorp, right, this is two doctors' bio. By the way, there are a gazillion ads. I do not recommend going to this website because there are just a gazillion ads, right? And even though I have an ad blocker in this version of the browser that I'm using, it's getting past it. But if you go and take a look at it, here's a bio, but it's mainly links to other things that he's done. And if you actually try to go look at the About page, right, just add opportunity, you'll see this person, Sefan Misa, the curator of this vibrant corner of the internet. His focus is on celebrity gossip, net worth updates, and celebrity measurements. Why trust you? It's, anytime somebody has to ask you or remind you why you can be trusted, that is a red flag. It's not on the 10. It's not on the 10 red flags. It's not on the 10 signs. But somebody says, this is why you can trust me. Believe me, you probably shouldn't trust them. But here is Dr. Gundry. Go and look at the images. That's interesting. All right. You can find out, are any of these things associated with a legitimate medical outlet? So there's nothing else. There's nothing here that says to me, oh, we can say who is the Center for Healthy Living. So Gundry MD Shop, number 5 is that's actually owned by Dr. Gundry. And so we can get rid of the duplicates, and we got it. So these are things that take just a very, very short period of time. But I want to go and talk a little bit more. So I'm of an age, and I'm getting to the point where I'm have a little less hair on the top than I used to have. So let's go talk about a specific video, right, that claims to be talking about a cure for balding and thinning hair. And the assumption is, if you look at the image, I'm not going to mouse over because it'll start the video and we're not going to hear the audio. But you look at this and you go, okay, that's Dr. Gundry in the middle. And maybe this is him today. But guess what? There's no actual indication that this is Dr. Gundry on the left. There's no picture of him at any point where we can see anything. So is this Dr. Gundry? We could say Are the ears the same? I don't know. Is this being done? But he says he had balding and thinning hair at the age of 45. Now I have a full head of hair by doing this. So you can go take a look. It's 17 minutes long. And essentially, what he's looking to do is he's looking to provide some establishing bona fides. So there is some arguably, quote unquote, legitimate science in here. He's talking about a hormone, DHT, dihydrotestosterone, and its impact on hair. You can go and you can look this up, and it's generally true. But is he going and is he trying to sell you something is the real question here. We'll get into that. But he's Gundry MD. This is Gundry H2. So this is another Dr. Gundry owned website. Ultimate H2, I have no idea what Ultimate H2 is. Might be a hydration formula or something like that. But guess what? Save up to $162 off the retail price when you search 6 boxes. You save almost $30 a box when you save 6 boxes. I shudder to think how expensive this is. And that's actually another red flag that we'll get to. One thing you may want to do is, I've gone to Google Scholar. I don't think I put this in the page for today's episode, but I will go and do that when we get done. One of the things you should do is you should go take a look at citations. So and this is why I will put this link in the post for today's episode when we get done, is that we have this book, Dr. Gundry's Diet Evolution, Turn Off the Genes That Are Killing You and Your Waistline. It's been out since 2008. It has only been cited 5 times, right? Whereas a more typical publication, peer-reviewed, which is in his, which might be in his wheelhouse as a cardiothoracic surgeon, successful survival of primates receiving transplantation with dead but non-beating donor hearts. This has got 73 citations. There are 14 versions of it. It's in Science Direct. Now, Science Direct we can go take a look at it. Science Direct is a peer-reviewed journal owned by Elsevier. And if you wanted to, you could essentially download, I believe this is not behind the paywall. You'd be able to download the whole thing, right? And you can go take a look at those citations. Optimal preparation techniques for humans, saphenous or saphenous vein grafts, cited 162 times. So when he is publishing, right, in a peer-reviewed journal, in his field, there are lots of citations. But here we have a website called nutritionstudies.org about the plant paradox, which is a book that he wrote. We can go take a look at nutrition studies. And we can say this is the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Study. So T. Colin Campbell is interesting, is that he's one of the researchers who is critical of what Dr. Gundry is saying. And so one of the things you can't do is you can't assume that all the citations are positive citations. And here's where he goes, right? So Dr. Gundry writes on his website, I believe I've discovered some unconventional truths about human tradition. Unconventional, yes, truths, not so fast, right? So you can go and take a look at this, but it's important to read citations. And if we click on this link for citations, right, what we do is we find that there is this PDF, someplace called american.edu, called The Corruption of the Scientific Method. And if you go take a look at the Corruption of the Scientific Method post, the e-journal of the World Academy of Art and Science is not a peer-reviewed journal, number one, right? And then we do have this question about, so we describe how the scientific method has been corrupted by thoughtlessly following a historical prescription that is reinforced by stakeholders with large financial interests. So in the abstract, this document is not formatted as a real peer-reviewed report would be formatted. So for example, we could go here and we're going to go not look at the citations, but we're going to go look at Science Direct. This is what, right, a real formatted peer-reviewed journal article is going to look like. This is not formatted like a peer-reviewed journal. You can, number one, that's a real huge thing. And here you've got a DOI, a digital object identifier. This is the digital object identifier, and it probably points to itself. Pretty much points to itself, right? It's going back to the original peer-reviewed peer-reviewed version of this article, not in Science Direct. I'm not going to go and try to get rid of all the cookies and things like that. But you get the idea here that this is not a peer-reviewed journal formatted article, right? The abstract number one says this is a conspiracy theory, and guess what? There's no DOI, right? So we could take a look at Nancy Flournoy, who's at University of Columbia, right? Fellow World Academy of Art and Science. So she's a fellow of this academy, and this is the e-journal for the academy. If it was peer-reviewed, it was only peer-reviewed by fellow members of the academy. So that's a direct conflict of interest. I'm just going through and talk about that, talk about these things, because these are really quick things you can do to find out. So, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Once you've got used to the flow of things, you can very, very quickly. I do link to this in the post for today's episode. It's at a website called nutritionfacts.org. And what they do is they talk about Dr. Gundry's book, The Plant Paradox. So all of these are things that are relatively easy to discover. And you should, if you have any questions whatsoever about the truth value of something, you should go and take a look at very, very quickly trying to find out what's going on. So we went from no peer review, and so I wanted to show you some peer-reviewed journals and some citations and how to tell the difference between a peer-reviewed journal and something which is not a peer-reviewed journal, right? And you can look to see if something is cited by the peers of the author. So from there, what I want to do, let's go talk about this. So this is an important thing. I talk about stories. So if you're looking at this on the internet, it's a personal testimonial, right? You've got a before and after photo. Remember, hair and no hair on one side, before and after. But we don't know that the person whose back of the head without the hair we're looking at is in fact Dr. Gundry. I'm not saying that it's not, but we don't know. And in the video, it doesn't actually show the photo again. It's just the thumbnail for the video. We don't actually are able to verify that the back of the head is Dr. Gundry's, the back of his head. So just quick understanding there. So we've got before and after photos and anecdotes of I felt better, right? And that's all the proof that's presented. There are comment sections full of short generic praise, and there are no negative reviews. Everything is positive. If there are negative reviews, they are scrubbed, perhaps, right? It's hard to imagine that there would be no 100%, no less than 100% positive reviews, but they may be scrubbed and they may be responded to in private. I'm not saying that I know this for a fact. I don't know this for a fact, but if all you see is a testimonial and all you see is comment sections that have nothing but glowing praise, that's a flag that you should take a look at it, right? So where does Dr. Gundry fit in all of this? The November 2021 poster claiming mRNA vaccines dramatically increase inflammation carried no statistical analysis and rested entirely on anecdotal data. That's it. So if it's all anecdotal data for which there is no supporting evidence, you should think twice about accepting it on face value. It may be true, it may not be true, but given the fact that Dr. Gundry appears to be relying on the fact that he is actually a medical doctor in cardiothoracic surgery, that what happens is that expertise in cardiothoracic surgery automatically carries over into nutrition, especially when his primary claim about lectins in the diet being poisonous, right? The source of inflammation, and you can fix your health, right, by avoiding foods that contain lectins and by purchasing a product that he sells, which is a weird kind of dichotomy. If you can avoid the problem by not eating the foods, why do you need to take an expensive supplement, right? Because you want to keep on eating the foods. Again, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I'm going to go back over here because we go back and forth. Anyway, so you get the idea. So if the evidence is only anecdotal, but they refer to studies, but there are not actually any. Oh, here is in fact the study. On screen, there's a link that you could pause the video and go to that URL, right? Or if there is a video and in the comment section, or not in the comment section, but in the description for the video, it doesn't actually give the link to the peer-reviewed research, or a study which backs up what it is that he's doing. Again, this is a 2021 poster, right? So this is a conference poster. It's not a research paper, right? And we don't know the source of who is in fact is claiming that mRNA vaccines dramatically increase inflammation, right? So that's another sign that you need to pay attention to what's going on. From there, cherry-picked evidence, right? So if there are 40 papers and only 3 of them support one position, he will only, or right, the media that you're consuming will only focus on the papers that support the proposition that they are trying to make. There are, again, there might be 3 in favor of what they're doing. There might be 37 which are not in favor of what they're do not support the claims being made. But they're only going to talk about the 3 that do. They're going to ignore the 37, making up those numbers that don't. Right, and they're going to go back to that one paper or 2 paper or 3 papers just over and over and over and over. Right, and so as we did in the episode with Dr. Keith Ayoob on this paper that's doing research on the effects of processing and the differences in flavanol content and total polyphenol content, which is as a result of changes in processing and how those affect health outcomes. Number one is it's important to know this is a study about obesity in mouse models. And if you were not a scrupulous researcher, what you may say is, oh, I'm a ceremonial cacao company and I'm selling you cocoa powder, not cocoa paste, which is the normal ceremonial cacao thing. I could go cite this study and say, see, right? Right. This proves that just because there's more processing, that doesn't mean it's necessarily worse. But the effects of that study were limited to obesity and things having to do with the gut microbiome and leaky gut syndrome, not necessarily overall health claims, and especially not ones made for arterial health. So you need to be very, very careful in terms of understanding what those medical reports. And that's why I had Dr. Ayoob in, because he'd actually say, hey, it looked like a really well-designed study. They understood where the limitations were. They were open about what the limitations were. They were very straightforward about what they were studying and where the conclusions they were making, right? What the conclusions they were making and how they related to the purpose of the study. Really important. So again, we can go take a look at where does Dr. Gundry fit into all of this, right? Again, this is all publicly available stuff, right? This, I spent some time doing some research. Again, I did use an LLM to help me, but I fact-checked independently many of the claims that were made on my own. Oh, all right, I'm going to go look at the source material that was presented, because when I do the fact-checking, the fact-checking prompts that I use always say, cite all, show me all the URLs that you went to, right? And if you're making a particular point, show me the URL to the point that you're making. So I go and I look and say, oh, okay, I'm relatively certain that that Claude in this case is not hallucinating an answer, right? So where Dr. Gundry fits. So what he did, he cites a paper on staining kidneys with lectins as evidence that lectins causes kidney disease. The paper was about using lectins as a testing tool, right? Not about evidence that lectins cause kidney disease. So he's got a paper, the paper says something, and he's misrepresenting and misusing the paper, apparently, right? Meanwhile, the longest lived populations in the world eat legumes daily, or eat foods that contain large quantities of lectins. And those whole grain eaters show lower heart disease, cancer, and all-cause mortality. So take a look. If there's, if there's one study and then you go look at another bit of media that you're consuming and it's always the same study that's being um, referred to, then that's a cause. And a quick search will say alternative evidence for XYZ, right? And in your favorite search engine, and it will go and say, but something as simple is, do lectins cause kidney disease, right? Would give you a place to go. So, right, these are skills, if they are important to you, that get picked up over time, right? These are not necessarily something that you would know on day one. And this is one of the reasons why I'm putting this presentation as a PDF in today's page and the supporting ebook, right? So you can go take a look at these on your own terms, on your own time, and then go, oh, how would I go about implementing these things? How would I go about using these ideas if I wanted to determine if a health claim on the internet was true or not? Right? Another sign, right, that the health claim you run across on the internet might not be legitimate and might be junk, right, is correlation dressed as a cause. So this is something that's fairly interesting. So correlation is not necessarily causation. Just because two things happen, right, in close proximity, does not mean that one caused another. So, for example, we could notice that in the summer, the ice cream consumption goes up, and in the summer, deaths by drowning in the ocean also go up. That does not mean that ice cream consumption causes more drowning, just because the two of them happen to be at the same time. It's just that it could be. One hypothesis that you might want to test is ice cream causes more drowning, right? Or which is, something that my parents might have said when I was much younger: don't go into the water, unless you've waited half an hour after you've eaten. So I suppose that's one hypothesis. The other one is that there are a lot more people swimming in the ocean in the summer, and therefore the incidence of the number of people who drown in the summer goes up. And it just is coincidence that both of these things are happening during the summer. So when we talk about correlation, it does not mean causation. That's really what it is that we're suggesting here. And we need to be very careful, right? When we go and read a health claim that says, I did this, and then shortly thereafter, something happened. You can't necessarily make that correlation, especially if, right, it's a sample size of one, it's just you. So how it shows up: rates of X rose as people ate more Y. So, a certain kind of inflammation went down when people reduced consumption of this, or so my art. I hope you get the idea. So if there is a claim and it's anecdotal only, or it is just the doctor or whoever the person in authority who's making the claim is, when people ate something, they got better, right? A marker moves in a blood test and gets named as the cause, right? So again, just because a marker moved a little bit doesn't mean it's the cause of what happened. There could be a bunch, especially when we're talking about diet and health. There's a lot of complex interplay, what are called confounding factors. It could be genetics. It could be environment. There are many things that might contribute to this. Epigenetic factors, not genetic factors, which would lead to something. It's not just I ate this and this happened, and therefore this must be the fact that eating this is what caused this. Right? People who take the product feel better, and nothing else changed apparently. Right? If you're a Dr. House fan at all, he says everyone always lies. I mean, they may not always lie, but they may not think something is important and they may not bring it up. So that's an interesting thing to consider as well. But correlation is not causation. So people give blood samples. So where Dr. Gundry fits. This is claims that have been made. Patients give blood samples. Results are said to suggest lectin damage, and the fix is his supplement line. Right? So, okay, he said, if you eat lectins, then you need my supplement. And however, if you eat lectins and there is a change in your blood, is that change necessarily caused by consuming vegetables, fruits, which can food items that contain lectins, and that causation has not been proven, right? And yet, even though medical authorities, nutritionists have said there is no correlation between, there is no causation. Right? Consuming lectins does not necessarily cause more inflammation. That you should worry about that, and certainly if you're worried about it, the answer to the question is just stop consuming them. Don't spend a lot of money on a supplement to get rid of it. So this is where this next one, claims you can't disprove, right? So in general, the idea here, in broader terms, is around something called unfalsifiability. Is the claim unfalsifiable? Has it been put together in some way that there's no way to prove it or disprove it, right? It's just there is nothing in the way the proposition is organized which will enable you to answer the question one way or another. And so sometimes it is, oh, the studies are suppressed, right? So, if I could show you the data, it would prove that I'm right, right? Your doubt is being reframed as being fooled by the industry or your own doctor. Your doctor is motivated to do X because of Y, and he's going to try to steer you in a particular path, right? Because he has some sort of reward for doing so. Conspiratorial thinking, right? Methods are withheld for proprietary reasons, right? And so where Dr. Gundry fits into this framing, right, is his pitches run on conspiracy framing. Conventional medicine does not want you to know this. Healthy foods are secretly poison, and he alone knows the truth, right? And the truth will set you free, apparently. Every rebuttal from nutrition researchers becomes further evidence of a cover-up. So it is this conspiracy framing. You cannot prove the claims, and underlying it, there's this vital truth, which I am sharing with you. And they're going to take down the video tomorrow, so you'd better go, right, and buy it today, because tomorrow you won't be able to find this again, right? So small studies, huge conclusions. You can't make conclusions about what happens at the population level if what you've done is you've done a study on 3 people or 4 people, or if what you've done is you've only done an in vitro, so in a petri dish or in a test tube, as opposed to in vivo, which is in living animals, living organisms. But going back to this this cocoa processing video episode that I did last week with Dr. Ayoob, it was a mouse model study. And while there is good evidence which suggests that we can take the mouse model and be reasonably confident that it will scale into humans, there's no guarantee. Right? So if it's only done in an animal, or if it's only been done at the cell level, it's only been done at the plant level, there's no guarantee that it will translate into humans. And then again, if you do it in 3 people or 11 people, I mean, it could be a poorly designed study, and there's no way to know if it will scale up to the population level. So you can do a small study, and then what you do is you extrapolate, because we got a quote unquote positive result in 3 people, in 3 mice, right? That what we can do is we can assume that it's going to run, and humans are going to respond the same way. So the lectin harm studies, right, that Dr. Gundry talks about, were run in cells, animals, and plants, not in humans. So that's a red flag, right? There were no human studies that he cites. And from the fact that these studies were run in cells and animals and plant, he concludes that beans, grains, and many vegetables drive most human disease, right? This is what he calls the plant paradox, which the medical and nutritional communities classify as pseudoscience. What people who do this are relying on is that you are not going to go and try to fact check their claims. And what I want to do in the course of today's episode is to say, fact checking is not hard, and you can save yourself lots of money. And I'm seeing this again directly. I have got a whole lot of people, a number of people in the responses to my ceremonial cacao video who said that number one, the product has changed. Number two, they did not sign up for a subscription service. They just did it one time, and they're being charged for subscriptions that they didn't sign up for. These are examples of you buy into the medical claim. Oh, I know that cocoa is good for me, so unprocessed cocoa must be better for me. And ooh, this has got another ingredient, for example, nattokinase, in the case of some Maya products, and all of a sudden it's going to get rid of all of my arterial plaque and it's going to prevent atherosclerosis and things like that. Well, those are some pretty serious medical claims that are being made. And before you hand over your credit card and buy some of this stuff, you better make sure that A, the company is trustable, and B, that the product they're making actually does what the claims for it are being true. And what I want to do today is the purpose of today's episode, right, is to give you some tools that you can use. What are some things that you should be wary of, what be on the lookout for, which are going to help you not get scammed? Because you're not a medical doctor, chances are. You don't have the background, maybe, to assess this, right? Fully and to understand it, right? But there are some things that you can do to go, well, before I spend money on this, I need to do a little bit more homework. Don't give in to this will disappear tomorrow, or if you get today there'll be a 5 for the price of 1 kind of thing. Oh, I better jump on it now. Well, that's what they're counting on. They're counting on that sort of adrenaline rush, some sort of a dopamine rush in the brain to overcome suspicion. Ooh, 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 I can save a lot of money now. Be very, very careful, right? That's what I want to keep you from doing. This happens, unfortunately, in chocolate and cocoa. Unfortunately, it happens there. And so you can go and use these tools as you examine something like the Maya ceremonial cacao. Um, is it something that you want to invest in? And if you go to the page on the Chocolate Life, right? So here's the page for the Chocolate Life. You can go to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, episode 179, and you can follow along and see the resources as I go through this, specifically in the context of Maya ceremonial cacao. So really, really important to understand what's going on. And this is just the larger context if you look at other medical health claims, but there are specific examples within the world of chocolate. Another thing that you want to be very, very careful about is that whoever is making this claim, right, is saying there's a health problem and I have the solution, right? Here's a health problem, you need to buy a supplement from me. Here's a health problem, you need to buy a powder, or you can buy a powder from me. So the person naming the danger is the person selling the protection. So a problem you've never heard of, plus you probably never heard of lectins. You probably had no idea what lectins were until you saw a video or an ad, right, in your social media feed, or YouTube, if you want to call that social media, where you had this doctorly kind of guy who you find out it says doctor in front of it. By the way, you need to be careful. Is it a medical doctor? Is it a DPhil? A Dr. Phil has a PhD, a DPhil? You need to be careful. They're both doctors. You need to understand what kind of doctor he's got and where he got it from. That's another issue, right? But right, you've never heard of lectins before, but it's the cause of all diseases. And if you stop eating lectins, then all of your disease will go away. Or if you don't want to stop eating lectins for $1,000 a year, $80 a month, right, you can take this supplement which interferes with lectin absorption somehow, something called Lectin Shield. Not entirely sure how it works. I should probably go and find out if there is a scientific basis for this. I may do that research a little bit later. How does Dr. Stephen Gundry's Lectin Shield work, and is there any scientific evidence to support that it works? Might be a good question. A year for Lectin Shield alone at $80 a month, and this is before you get into some of his other products: Total Restore, BioComplete 3, $120 per item skincare line. You could be into this gentleman for, I think the technical term is butt tons of money. So Dr. Gundry named the problem, and he sells the only cure. Dr. Gundry is not the only person who does this, who will go here and say, I mean, just it's ridiculous the number of people who come on and claim to be medical experts in ads, right, on social media, and you look at them and you go, no, right? If they say there's a problem and buy this product, you should immediately assume that they're not representing the entire problem completely and fairly, accurately. Just it is the number one um, commercial indication that this is a scam, right? Not just as a junk health claim, but this is a scam. You should be very, very, in my opinion, this, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that these are my opinions on this. So again, credentials are doing the work, right? A genuine credential from a field unrelated to the claim, right? Gundry is a cardiothoracic surgeon, and all of the work that he's doing right now is in nutrition. He does not, while he does have a legitimate credential as an MD and history as a published author in peer-reviewed journals, as a cardiothoracic surgeon, there's no evidence that I was able to discover which says that he actually has formal medical training and a degree in anything related to nutrition, right? So he's using his genuine credential. He appears to be using his genuine credential, right, as an MD, as a cardiothoracic surgeon, to prop up, right, his reliability, his credibility for the nutrition claims that he's making. I don't know, right, that he hasn't done a whole lot of his own private research in nutrition, right? But you can't rely on the doctor credential in surgery to say that, oh, yes, he is competent as a nutritionist, right? So lab coats, stock footage, a lot of TV appearances sold as an endorsement, right? So Dr. Gundry, he's a real MD, former cardiothoracic surgeon, published in surgical journals, now advising the world on nutrition. But he also runs at least 9 social media accounts under variations of his own brand, which read like many independent voices, but they're all part of a single marketing operation. That's another thing you can do. For example, when I went to Maya ceremonial cacao, it was a try Maya and buy Maya, and they were using different offers and doing A/B testing to find out which offer generated the most sales. Right, so you can have the different accounts under the same brand who are testing to find out which one of the presentations, which one of their pitches, which one of their sales offerings, which one of their pricing offerings is the one that's going to deliver the most income, right? And they're constantly using these. Number one is they point to each other, right, which is to increase credibility, quote unquote. But it's also part of the marketing shtick. Right? Again, big claims, thin proof. The bigger the promise, the more evidence you should have, right? This will completely eliminate kidney disease or, erectile dysfunction or something like that. I mean, pick any number of items, right? Medical claims that are being made, right? So the bigger the promise, the more evidence it owes you and the less it tends to shows, right? So you might have something that says up to 30 times more polyphenols, right? But okay, where do those polyphenols come from? And this is something that I'll talk about again. His olive oil is marketed at up to 30 times the polyphenols of supermarket oil, right? But there's no independent testing. There's no independent measurement of that. And it turns out when there was an independent sensory analysis, the olive oil itself was considered to be subpar, the lowest grade of olive oil by independent sensory experts. And the polyphenol content was because of an added, it was supplemented. It wasn't naturally occurring in the olive oil. And I talk a little bit about that in the EPUB that's associated with this, the document that's associated with it. So it says clinically proven with no trial. You can open and read. One product reverses disease, adds years, right? Might have no side effects, which is really a challenge because if you're trying to give something that changes the body's metabolism, especially to older people who might be medicated, that's a real challenge. No side effects, Right? So independent testing of Gundry's olive oil found about 500 right. So found 586 milligrams per kilogram of polyphenols in an olive oil, which is high, but is not, you know, up to 30. That's a ceiling claim, right? It could 15 is up to 30. It could be 18 one year and 22 the year after that. There's, up to 30 times. It all depends. Am I using an extra virgin unfiltered olive oil? I mean, I was traveling over this past weekend as up in Flagstaff, and there were some olive oils that I saw that had pressing dates of 2 months ago. I had literally had pressing dates of June. Some had pressing dates of April and May. Not something that's been through a supply chain and been sitting on a shelf for 3 months or 4 months, for 12 months. And the fact that his olive oil has a 3-year shelf life is much longer, right, than practice suggests for a high quality olive oil. Unfortunately, it means that, oh, I just happen to be a geek about these kinds of things, and I know a little bit about olive oil and what I'm looking for in an olive oil. And so this is something part of just the knowledge that I have about the universe as I'm experiencing what's going on around me. But avoid vague multipliers with no actual measured amount, no actual batch testing, right? Clinically proven with no what clinical trial proves what it is that's going on. So things to be very, very careful of. Big claims, thin proof. So no methods, no controls, right? So if you're doing a study, if there's no control group, there's nothing to compare the result against, right? Sample size, dose, duration, not a part of what it is going on. What it is said, lab tests are referenced but never published, right? So when I look, for example, at Dr. Gundry's olive oil, there are no batch certificates of analysis published in the 5 years since the initial test. And I did point this out in last episode where I was talking about cacao. Maybe it was the episode before, where there was a company that was providing their certificate of analysis, but they had 2 different products and they had the same certificate of analysis. That makes no sense whatsoever. But because if you had 2 different products, it was like heavy metal testing. If you had 2 different products, right? They said we test all of our products. Oh, it was related to Onyx Chocolate Labs. So again, we're talking about coffee and chocolate. So this is Onyx Chocolate Labs, that they had 2 different bars of chocolate using beans for different origins, but they cited the same lab analysis for both of them, which doesn't work. Right. So, you might have tested it 5 years ago, but just because you tested it 5 years ago doesn't mean that what you packaged last week actually meets the certificate of analysis from 5 years ago. So you do need batch analysis testing. That batch does need to be recent. And you need to check for things like, are they using one test for a bunch of everything? Right. But the sensory analysis graded as olive oil as lampante, which is a defect grade, so bad tasting. Right. And there's no control groups in the research. So you go, it may be true that consuming high polyphenol olive oil is good for you, but the olive oil that Gundry appears to be selling is not very high quality according to independent sensory analysis and sensory analysis, right? And the level of polyphenols appears to be added, not naturally occurring. So you can go in and take a look at that yourself, but that's what I have found in my research. Right? So let's go. Those are the 10. That was number 10 of 10. So how does try/buy Maya fit in to all of this? So 6 flags on one sales page. Manufactured urgency. A countdown timer promising a discount that expires. If you see something that says buy in the next 30 minutes, right? Now, it may be that this is on clothing, or you're going to Amazon and it says this offer expires in 23 minutes or in 12 hours. There's a whole lot of difference between buying a t-shirt, right, and buying a nutrition supplement or something which is going to affect your health. So manufactured urgency is a clue, right, that you should in fact slow down and do some research, right? Right? Authority with no trace, right? So a cardiology with no board listing, clinic biotox or publications. So this is something that the people who sell Maya ceremonial cacao did. They made up a cardiologist. I went and looked for this cardiologist, and there does not appear to be a real person with the credentials that the page suggests that they have. So authority with no trace. To some extent, right? Dr. Gundry is a cardiothoracic surgeon, but he's not a nutritionist. So that's authority, right? Just because you know about heart surgery does not mean that you qualify to be a nutritionist. So that's authority with there's no credential behind it. So research by name only. Harvard research shows the flavanols work with no study named and no linked, right? So if there's Harvard research, there should be a DOI, right? A digital object identifier, boom, a DOI that goes to the source research, and it should be related to Harvard somewhere, right? Right? A trial that says otherwise. They cite a study as proof of a 35%, 39% functional gain. However, when you go look at the study, no significant benefit was found, right? So you need to be careful if they cite a study that the study actually says what they claim that it does, right? Impossible safety claim. 0 side effects for a bioactive regimen aimed at medicated older adults. So you're an older adult, you have some problem with atherosclerosis, clogged arteries, other things which a ceremonial grade cacao with added nattokinase included is, and you've got somebody who's taking a regimen of blood pressure medication and blood sugar medication, and maybe they have COPD or some other chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, some other things, and you're giving them something, right, that affects those systems of the body, and claiming that there are no side effects. You just be very, very careful, right? And there's nothing you can verify, right? There's no variety, no origin, maker disclosed. And in the case of Maya, they misstated their Trustpilot score, which is really, really, really egregious, because it takes 12 seconds to actually go to Trustpilot separately. Go to trustpilot.com, type in the name of the company or the name of the product, and see what the actual store is, see what the actual score is. So this is something that showed up in just the Tribe by Maya as a connection to what it is that we're doing today. So Dr. Gundry has been the through line for to this point, but in previous work that I've done, here's how these kinds of ideas have had an impact on what it is that I have to say about the product claims that are being made about the Maya ceremonial cacao. And then we got Dr. Lane Kilpatrick. So Dr. Kilpatrick was going on talking about alternative cocoa replacing chocolate, so genetic modification, and then why talking about Mars wanting to genetically modify every cacao tree on Earth, right? And then who gave them the right to do this, right? And so if you want to know more about that, there are 2 episodes about Dr. Kilpatrick that I did on this, and you can go take a look at those in depth, right? But again, he's a pharmacist with 1 million followers talking about cocoa. So he does have a legit pharmacy degree from the University of Utah in 1989, right? Which made him, it doesn't make him, it made him a registered pharmacist. Is a very large audience, 1 million followers on Instagram, close to 500,000 on TikTok. And he did make some claims, which turned out to be supportable. And this is one of the things that you need to be careful about, is that, it may be, for example, that Dr. Gundry's video about DHT and the DHT effect on hair loss, that may be true, right? But it may not be supportable that his cure for it, which may be something he's trying to sell you, is a way to solve the problem. And you probably run across ads for a lot of DHT blocking shampoos, and other things which are supposed to grow hair, or supplements, right, that are designed to block DHT. So these may be in part true. I mean, he claims that his mom gave him a small glass of orange juice every day, and that ruined part of his metabolism for the rest of the day. That would be something that would need to be checked out. It may be that aspects of it are true. I mean, I tend not to drink um, juice, fruit juice, which has no fiber in it, right? Because it's basically, you're just drinking liquid sugar. And I try to reduce the amount of um, added sugar thing in my diet, right? Even though there may be no added sugar in apple juice. The apple juice is basically, drinking mostly sugar. So it may be that parts of the claims are true. There may be some stuff that is being said that is easily researchable and turns out to be true, right? But you have to examine the entire set of claims that are being made, and not just assume that because one thing is true, that everything that is being said is true. It can be that if you have a book, right, there are going to be facts. Oh, Abraham Lincoln, well, he wasn't a vampire hunter, but there was a real Abraham Lincoln, right? And in the story about him being a vampire hunter, they mention real places and real people and real events. That doesn't mean the claims about Abraham Lincoln being a vampire hunter are true, right? So you need to be aware of that conflation, right? That there may be something which tests out, but that doesn't mean that everything that tests out. And they're relying on people. The people who do this are relying on people not to uh, understand that one fact, that a claim might be true, but that doesn't mean that everything that they say is true. It's really, really important to do that. So there are always, in the end, 5 questions worth asking. Number 1, right, is find a peer-reviewed trial in humans, right? So you could actually, this could be a query in a search engine, whether it is Google or DuckDuckGo or ChatGPT, if that's what you're using instead of a search engine these days. Um, Dr. Stephen Grundy claims X, Y, and Z about this and that and the other. Where is the peer-reviewed trial that supports this claim in humans? So this could be the basis of a search, right? Right. Then you can ask yourself, who is making money if I believe this? Why is the person making the claim selling the cure? They're trying to frighten you, right? Big pharma doesn't want you to know this. Big food doesn't want you to know this. The 5 companies that control food don't want you to know X and Y and Z. I'm blowing up the conspiracy, right? And I'm telling you that you can solve your problem by eating this supplement, right? So those 2 things together, who makes the money, right? And is the person who makes the money the person who's frightening you, right, into frightening you with a story, right? No, does this, whatever it is that is being presented, does it contradict what the major health bodies say? And here's where conspiracy thinking rears its head again, unfortunately. Well, big pharma doesn't want you to know. Your doctor doesn't want you to know, right? Big food doesn't want you to know, because if you knew what I'm going to tell you, they would go out of business. They would lose money. They're actively trying to keep you from knowing what I'm trying to tell you about this, right? But they might be a medical doctor. So, for example, Dr. Lane Kilpatrick was a pharmacist, but he's talking right now as a hormone specialist, right? He calls himself the hormone doctor or the hormone specialist, right? And it turns out that it's not apparent that he has any specific medical training in hormone therapy, right? And if he doesn't have any, and he also doesn't appear to have any specific background in cacao either. So he's talking about this in a way that scares people, right? But unfortunately, he's got a huge audience, right? He's got over 1 million followers, right? Who pay attention to what it is that he has to say, and ultimately he's got a line of supplements that he's trying to sell people, right? All right. And is the claim ever unfalsifiable? Could the claim ever to be shown to be wrong? So those are 5 things you can ask yourself really quick off the top of your head to go, oh, how do I go about figure out what's going on? Right. So find the study, check the person, check the pictures. You can use a reverse image search and go, oh, is this image used anywhere else, right, to make a similar claim or a different claim? So this is one way of saying, oh, this same image is used at 9 different websites, all of which appear to be connected to each other in some way, right, through a name. That would be one thing to do. So you can do this with a video search, right? Google Images, TinEye, catches stock, lab, borrow doctors, and before and after photos that have been around for years. These are 3 things that you can do in 2 minutes. When you connect this 5 questions with where to check in 2 minutes, you may save yourself hundreds or thousands of dollars and potentially expose yourself to um, credit card fraud and identity theft, for which you need to be very, very careful about doing as well. Then finally, the last page in today's episode is, if nothing else that you do, is do not share an internet health claim until you have checked it out. Right? Just because it seems exciting, it may be too good to be true. If it seems that exciting, remember that real science is serious and sober, not exciting and mysterious. And it's the combination of exciting and mysterious, right? Real science can be exciting, right? But it's not mysterious. It understands its limits. It's humble about what it does and doesn't know and what it is that it's saying. But if there's one thing that I would recommend, is that if you run across something like on this, hold pause on the share button. Do not click the share button to a friend or to your larger community until what you've done is you've done your own due diligence. You've checked it out for yourself. Really, really, really important to do so. All right. And today, here's the post for today's episode. As I mentioned, there are a couple of things that I'm going to do. I'm going to add a couple of links to this page when I get done. And then I'm going to put 2 documents into this page as well, one of which is the presentation that I've been giving, and the other one is the EPUB, which supports the presentation that I've been giving. And you can go find out more about these people, whether it's Dr. Gundry, some pushback on what it is that he's saying, right? And then the previous episodes that I talked about with Maya Ceremonial Cacao and Lane Kilpatrick. So that's all here on today's episode. And with that, I want to say thanks everybody for joining me here today. The monthly member AMA call is going to be in about 15-18 minutes. So if you are a member, and you can go to the annual member newsletter, the August member newsletter. I'm not signed in, so if you're not actually a member, you're not going to be able to get the link. But the link for today's episode, for the link for the August member AMA call, is in the August member newsletter. As I said, you can click on the join button. There's always a free membership tier. But if you do have the financial resources, I understand it's a big ask. Not everybody does. Sign up for the free tier, you're helping. But if you do have the financial resources, starting as little $5 a month, $42 a year. And when you sign up at the Team TLCL leader at the annual level or above, it includes consulting hours. So there is 1 hour, 2 hours, and 3 hours are included with the 3 annual levels at the leader and above level. But again, I understand not everybody has the freedom, not everybody has the resources to financial resource. We live in strange times and we live in difficult times. But I do want to thank everybody. And hopefully what you've done is you found that the information that I provided here today is useful in the future. And so if you get a chance to, in the future, as you're watching this, like the video, subscribe to the Pod Save Chocolate channel, right? And support the work that we're doing which is free. Subscribing to the Pod Save Chocolate channel is free. And we can spread more information about why chocolate is good for you and why chocolate is great for you and why it's good for the planet and all those wonderful things. And have fun while doing it. Because remember, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you just might be doing it wrong. Until the next time, everyone, ciao.